Welcome to The Blind. It is season 2, episode 12. We've got our man Joe Kiefner here with us, and we are going to talk about some duck migration tonight. I'm sure we'll talk a little goose migration as well, but
Okay.
we don't really hunt ducks very much, but we're going to dive all into the migration station and what's going on with the ducks and geese around Arkansas and all over the U.S.
Yeah.
Cam, hit that little intro, and let's get started. Season 12. Before we get too far into the podcast, let me correct myself. It is not season 12. It is episode 12, and we want to welcome everybody right here to the blind and our Lyle Real Estate Studio. We've got our man Joe Kiefner here with us from
So
the
guys,
Migration Station. Joe, how's it going tonight, buddy?
it's going good.
Good to
Going
have you,
good.
Joe.
Another day in paradise. Yeah.
Well, man, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, gathering all of this data and putting it out for guys like us that want to see it. So we appreciate your time.
You probably
Yeah.
saw a couple of familiar names up there, Apex and Lyle, huh?
Yeah, I did. I saw a couple familiar faces in you guys' intro as well. Yeah, it's good to
Yeah.
have some cross sponsorship there. That's pretty cool.
That's right. And so, of course, you can see on your screen, we come to you each and every episode from the Lyle Real Estate Studio, of course, with all of our other awesome partners here on The Blind. Perfect Limit Outdoors, Apex Ammunition, Shin Gear, Alpha Innovation, Stratton Seed Company, and, of course, the official coffee of The Blind, Dirty Duck Coffee. So,
There you go.
well, Joe, why don't you start out and tell us a little bit about yourself personally before we
Yeah.
dive off into this adventure of yours?
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I promise I'm not that interesting, so I'll keep it short. My name is Joe Kiefner. I live in Oklahoma City, in specific. I'm originally from Missouri. That's kind of where I cut my teeth hunting ducks and geese. Went to school in Louisiana. Lived a little bit in Texas, and now I'm in Oklahoma, or Ducklahoma as I like to call it. Uh, and I this migration station thing started out as a little passion project. I just wanted to be able to, for my own information, just kind of keep track of where things are and where they're at, and maybe help myself make some better decisions with my time. And then my wife was actually the one who had the idea. She's like, "Do you think people might want to, see this information?" I was like, "Well, I guess one way to find out." Launched our, Instagram, I guess August of last year, and rest is history, I guess.
That's awesome. And yeah, man, we followed you and see all the stuff you put out and man, it's just getting better and better and better all the
I
time
appreciate that. I
and
appreciate
more
that.
information and Garrett told me one day, he said, "Man, we've got to get them on the show. This is
Yeah,
really good stuff." And I told him, I said, "Hey, make it happen, brother."
Which is
So,
yeah,
really interesting. I feel like I learned something watching your page and some of the terms and things that you throw out. I'm just like, I never heard anything like that.
I
So it's
appreciate that.
really cool what you're doing.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and I learn stuff every day too. Like I'm just like everybody else, just trying to keep track of all this information. Figure out where they're at and where they're going to be. And Mother Nature always throws curveballs. You never know with any sort of certainty the
What do you
days
do,
that you
what do
think.
you do that kind of gets you in all of these analytics and being able to pull this data? What's kind of your background that led you into that?
So my educational background is engineering. So I went to LSU in Baton Rouge for engineering.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, excuse me.
I went to LSU for engineering and graduated with a petroleum engineering degree. Part of that is pretty heavy analytics, and so that's kind of my background. And I just kind of merged my educational experience with my passion for duck and goose hunting, and the cross section of those two things is Migration Station.
Yeah. And speaking of having you on the show, if anybody watching while we are here live, if you have any questions for Joe about what he's doing or just questions in general that he might can answer, make sure you comment those on Facebook or YouTube. We are live on both places right now, and we'll be able to pop those up on the screen, and we'll try to get Joe to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah.
If you are tuning in on YouTube or Facebook, we appreciate you for watching tonight. And then shortly after this live stream is over with, we will have it out on Apple Podcast and Spotify. So, and if you are watching on Facebook, hit that share button. We want everybody to see Joe and what he's got to say tonight. So, but Joe, you kind of told us who you are and kind of your background before this all started. But why don't you take us to what for people tuning in that may not follow you already or may not know what Migration Station is, why don't you kind of start from the very beginning, the basics, exactly what it is and what you do?
Yeah, I think the simplest way to put it is our core mission is to try to put information that's out there in the world, but maybe impossible to get because you don't have the connections, or really hard to gather because it's in a bunch of different places. Take all of it and put it into one place that's free to use. So like our operation costs are covered through our sponsorship. So everything we do is free to the public. If you want to figure out, where the ducks are, where they're going, where they've been, different species, go to our website or follow us on our social media page, because we're the aggregators of all that information. Just trying to make information more easily accessible. That's pretty much it.
So you are like the Google of
Yeah.
migration, right?
Yeah. So Google's main function is called indexing, and all that is just a fancy way of saying we just take all the information and we allow you to access it from one place. And that's effectively what we do. We just take all the information around ducks and geese and their migrations, and we put it in one place.
And if anybody wants to find you, you have a website, you have an Instagram.
Yeah. And we got a TikTok. We got a TikTok page. We're not actually on Facebook. I need to get on Facebook, but we got our social media handles on anywhere you have social media. It's at Migration Station USA, and then our website's www.migrationstationusa.com.
So you kind of told us about, you talked with your wife about this. You were already kind of doing some of this on a smaller scale, I'm sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And she kind of urged you into doing this. Take us back to that very beginning stage, like day one. Your wife tells you this. You think about it, I'm sure, for a little while, and you're like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this." How do you start down the path of
so
this?
what it was it was during COVID, and I was looking for some creative outlets, and I started doing some software development around just some other random things. And then I thought to myself, it'd be really helpful now that I'm living in Oklahoma to know a lot of my family and most of my friends are still back in Missouri at this time. And it'd be really helpful for me to know like where the ducks are and when they get to Missouri and Illinois and Kentucky and the surrounding areas. And so I, wrote some software up, made this thing happen, and didn't really think much of it. I was like, that's pretty cool, whatever. And then my wife, she kind of took a step back. She was like, well, hold on a second, like that. Someone else might find that interesting. She's like, are these the only states that offer this information, or are there other avenues of getting information? And that's when the light bulb went off. And I think within 24 hours, I have mapped out on a notepad every avenue of getting information that we could possibly strive to get. And we've implemented most of them, and there's still a lot left on the roadmap. But that was day one, and that was June of 2020, I think, is when we first had the idea. And so we developed it for a year. We had 1 year of beta testing, which was just friends and family. Just, hey, my friends and mom, dad, brother, cousin, I want you guys to use this thing and just tell me, is it even worth putting money into? Mm-hmm. And then after that, they said, hey, you ought to lean into this. And then we went public, meaning like we just opened up to the world, and the rest is history.
And so, I mean, you're talking about, this is way over our head. I mean, the information.
I don't know about that, but.
So you just, of course, all great ideas start out on a notepad. So, you write down all of this stuff, and then you start. What was the word that you used? You wrote.
It's just software development. It's no,
So
it's
you developed your own software
yeah,
to where
pretty much.
you can.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
Well,
It's
that right there just blows my mind. We're not even to the good part yet. And,
We can't even get our headphones to work right. So
Yeah, if you hear any technical difficulties throughout the show, we've been working on it for about 2 weeks, and we still don't have it under control. And then we've got maybe
Hey,
we
we're
should
getting
just call Joe. You know, I mean,
Yeah, I don't know, but
Right.
I'm not. Hey, I'm not IT support. I know what I'm doing when I'm talking ducks and geese and data, but other than that, like you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm liable to. I mean, heck, I'm the one who told you I'm not wearing my AirPods because I couldn't get them figured out. So
yeah, yeah. Well, I guess the my background in looking at migration. I think everybody probably used to follow the Ducks Unlimited migration map,
yeah,
and people would upload their own little commentary saying what they're seeing in the field and following that. And so when I found yours, I just thought, man, this is taking it to a whole nother level.
well, I
Yep.
appreciate that, Evan. That's really nice. That comment comment down there.
Yeah, we appreciate Ever for tuning in and appreciate the
Yeah,
comment. And
yeah,
so you developed this from the ground up, and so how do you gather, just on the simplest terms without getting too
yeah,
far into it yet? We do want to get into it, but just
yeah.
kind of how did you decide where to start getting your information from?
Yeah, so a little bit. So we're patent pending. Our software is patent pending. So there's probably only so much I can divulge because with the patent office, they want
Yeah,
to
of
make
course.
sure that
Yeah.
things are proprietary, right? But uh, the best way I know to answer that is like we look for data that's authentic and verifiable or
Yeah.
from an authoritative source.
Not
So
Wikipedia.
not Wikipedia. And like, while I love people's pile pictures or lanyards full of ducks, like that's great. We get those reports all the time. We don't use those. Those are hard to verify. We don't know where they're
Hmm.
at.
Hmm.
Word of mouth reports, we will use those sometimes, like during teal season and snow goose season. We will accept word of mouth reports. So Brian, you'll say, "Hey man, there's a lot of teal in Arkansas." Boom, we'll use that. But for our main regular duck and goose season, we actually just recently implemented a way for users to submit data, but it's in the form of a picture or a video of live birds that we have some AI software that goes through and counts, the birds in those images and uses that as migration data. And in doing that, we're making sure that the data source is authentic and verifiable. It's not you know, you'd like to think people are telling the truth all the time, but sometimes, Joe might say, "Hey, there's no ducks in Oklahoma." Well, maybe Joe's just hunting the wrong spot, or maybe Joe's, trying to keep people away from the spot, or
Yeah.
maybe Joe says, "Hey, there's a bunch of ducks in Oklahoma," but he's in the one honey hole in the whole state.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of sift through that. So
I
the
mean,
simplest way to
and it
answer it,
makes it even better for people like us that are looking at your information to know that it's authentic, and that you have a way to make sure that you're getting correct information. Because
yeah,
of course, I'm even skeptical of, like when the Game and Fish Commission here in Arkansas flies, a plane over land, and they tell you there's this many ducks in this area and stuff. I mean, of course, maybe with AI now, but they've been doing that for years. I want to know who can count that many ducks that quickly when they're flying over, and I want to know how accurate it is.
it's better than nothing. It's better
But
than
it,
nothing.
it
You got
is
to get
better
on
than
that.
nothing, and I'm sure they're close. But it's
Mhm.
not going to be. But it makes us feel a little better about the information that you're given, because you do go the extra mile to make sure that it's a credible source.
Yeah, so with that, like those flyover surveys and whatnot, that's verifiable. That's authoritative data.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference between. I'm going to get a little technical for you. So you have to forgive me for nerding out, but there's a difference between accuracy and precision.
Hmm.
Accuracy is there's 100 ducks. We say there's 100 ducks. Precision is no matter what we say and what the actual count is, how we do this is the same every time.
Hmm.
So that even though they might be miscounting, or maybe they're not, maybe they are, maybe they're not, they're doing it the same way every time for decades. The data that you're getting, comparatively or relatively, is usable. So,
Hmm.
like, while we might not be able to say those surveys are 100% accurate, if they're doing them the same way since 1990, relatively speaking, if they say, "Hey, 2022, the most ducks Arkansas has had in a decade. That's probably fair because
Mhm.
they've been doing it the same way for the past
Yeah.
decade. So accuracy and precision are, you know, a little different.
Joe,
That's my soapbox. I'll hop off of it.
are you pretty much tracking the Mississippi Flyway? I know that you said that I saw on your page you've had a lot of requests outside of that, and you're
Mhm.
trying to branch out a little bit. Was it primarily when you started the Mississippi Flyway, or?
Yeah, I think there's, if you were to go look at number of states that have the most duck and goose hunting licenses sold and our data coverage, it's almost a perfect cross section. Our data exists where there's a lot of data to be had, I guess is
Mhm.
the best way to
Yeah.
put it. The one exception to that was last year was Texas. We just didn't have a good network down there. We couldn't find a lot of verifiable data sources down there. We changed that this year with the implementation of our new feature, which allows users to submit photos or videos that we can verify or authenticate. And our data coverage in Texas has expanded pretty drastically, and we're pretty happy about that. I will say though, like with this new feature and us opening it up to the public to contribute, I won't share too much of how we do it because I don't want people to figure out how to beat the system. But we have some AI that like will, within reason, it's hard sometimes, but within reason, if you go pull an image off of Google, we'll know about it. We'll figure it out. We won't use that information. We had somebody submit a report from a Oregon Department of Wildlife and Parks article from 2020. Submitted an image from it and said, "Hey man, thanks, but we're gonna pass on that one."
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got the technology to do it. Why not? I mean, the more credible you are, the better I think the future will be, and the better the brand will be. And so, of course, if hunters can trust the data, I mean, it's going to get used. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
tool that Garrett and I don't have the time to do ourselves. You gather it for us,
it's
you know
free
and
too.
and
It's
and
free.
we can go look at it, whether it helps us or not. It's still interesting,
Yeah, yeah,
as far as I mean, and I don't mean that in a negative way. What I
no,
mean is that if Garrett and I are going out hunting, we're not going to get on your website and say, well, man, it's just not showing a lot of ducks for our area, we're not going to go out. I
yeah,
mean, but it's interesting to see what patterns you guys are seeing, and where ducks are that you're getting information from. And I think that's great for avid hunters, and maybe even the novice hunter that's just interested in seeing some of that stuff.
yeah. So I mean, we get feedback that ranges from that to the other end of the spectrum. One of my, I would call him my mentor for hunting. He was an early beta tester before we were, available to the public. He said, "Joe, what you're doing is really cool, and I think a lot of people are really going to like it. But for folks like me, I'm going hunting on Saturday regardless. It's cool to know what's going on. It's cool to know what might be north of me and what might be south of me." He's like, "But I'm going hunting regardless." So we've gotten that's similar to what you just said, that we got feedback like that a lot. We've also got feedback from folks at the end of the season when we opened up a survey for folks, and we did have people say, "Hey, I only have a couple of days of PTO. I work 80 hours a week during the winter. I get one or two, mulligans per season."
Yeah.
And knowing with confidence, I'm not saying migration station is the magic bullet and going to get me a limit, but feeling even a little bit more confident that I'm making the right decision to, I'm not going to take off this Saturday. I'm going to wait till next Saturday. Like that gave them a lot of confidence. I mean, if that's all we do, then that's a success,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Well, that man, I'm really intrigued. I want to dive more off into it. Um, Joe, we take a couple breaks each and every episode to show some
Yeah,
love to our sponsors and our partners and stuff. So we're going to take our first commercial break of the night, and when we come back, we're going to dive more into some of the data, what you can tell us. We don't want you to
yeah,
give away all your secrets.
yeah,
And then of course, we want to talk about what patterns you're seeing, and things from someone who looks at it every single day. What's going on with the ducks and the geese in the U.S. And so we're going
yeah.
to dive into all of that. And when we come back from this commercial, we'll have more with Joe Kiefner from the Migration Station. Welcome back to episode 12 of season 2. We have got the main man, Joe Kiefner from the Migration Station with us. And man, we're already very intrigued by what you have to say. So I know our listeners are going to want us to dive a little more into this kind of stuff.
All right.
But tell us, what you can. And I know we've hit on it a little bit briefly a little bit a minute ago. But you know, maybe not into detail because I know you can't, but where do you gather this information from, and how do you get it?
It's man, I wish I had a better answer for you, but the best way I know to describe it is we talked earlier about software development. If you were to take the book Huckleberry Finn, and instead of each line of that book being about, that story, you instead made every line of that book be software code. That's about how much code we have running on a daily basis. So there's a there's a lot of different places to get this information. Most all of it comes from public domains, so like the internet. A good fair bit of it, though, now that we've launched our new feature, comes from the users. So photos and videos of ducks, we can use those. So as long as we get a little bit of information with it,
Mm-hmm.
posts on the internet. If it's a PDF or if it's an Excel file, we can use that information too. So as long as it's authentic, and it's from a source that we trust, ground counts, surveys, all of it. And there is no one source. We truly and honestly comb, just like a Google would, we comb the internet. We comb the internet.
Do you get a lot of information from the state wildlife services, like the Arkansas Game and Fish and things like that?
Yep, some of it will be, but it's never directly. None of that is provided to us.
Yeah.
Via hand or private messages. It's all, if it exists publicly, we will comb it, and if we think it checks out, we'll use it. If it doesn't, then we won't. But we also go to other domains. It's really just a matter of whether or not we think the source is verifiable or authoritative. But those agencies, like a lot of their information's about as legit as it can get, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I got some questions. So I want to get into migration itself a little bit. So the duck migration is one of the greatest spectacles that God created. I mean, it's just it's amazing to watch when you see it with your own eyes when you're out in the field. It's fun to get online and look at Migration Station and see what's going on. But we might have some listeners out there. I know most everybody's probably duck hunters, but let's just kind of start with basic migration. Okay. Just try to tell our listeners kind of basically what happens with duck migration, and then we'll work our way up from there. I got several questions I want to ask you.
Well, that's a very open-ended question. I think the best way to put it is, I mean, this time of year, ducks their internal clocks start ticking, and they're urged, whatever you want to call it, to go to their wintering grounds. Where they breed is going to be too cold. There's not going to be enough resources for them. And so they will migrate like any other migratory animal, either to breed or to winter before the next breeding season. And so there are different species of birds that migrate differently based off different conditions. Teal, obviously, as we all know, and pintail alike, they will migrate very early, most likely due to the first full moon. They can just sense it. Whenever the first full moon of fall happens in September or even later in October, if they haven't moved, they will. And then you have, and that's probably true for all species. Some of them won't move as quickly, but their internal clocks will start ticking. So that's moon phase. Photoperiod. We just posted a video about this today. Photoperiodism, or what a photoperiod is just a change in the amount of light during a 24-hour period. Mm-hmm. So if you have days getting shorter, and like we're coming up on a new moon, which means there's not going to be a moon in the sky, the amount of light available to these birds up north is going to be even less. So they're like, man, it's getting colder. These days are getting shorter. There's no light in the sky at night. We need to start thinking about moving to more, fertile usable grounds. So that's moon phase, photoperiod. You've got obvious ones, temperature. I would say that's probably not even the most impactful. We think it is, but it might not be. But it's the one that's probably the most obvious. When things get really, really cold, birds start moving around more, and they will start moving south. Weather conditions, if there's 12 inches of snow on the Dakotas, birds are going to migrate. And then lastly, wind. If there's a hard north wind, birds will take advantage of that because I always try to simplify it as much as I can. People probably laugh and roll their eyes at this, but like put yourself in their shoes for a second. Like you're a duck. Your primary objective for the next 4 months is to survive winter, not get shot. That's it. What are you going to do? You're going to do as little as possible to expend as little energy as possible and not get shot. That's pretty much it.
So that leads right into my next question. So, a debate between hunters now is: do ducks migrate later, or do they migrate shorter distances now than what they did in the past?
I don't know. It's really
Based
interesting.
off historical data.
Yeah. What I can tell you is based off historical data, states that are further south are seeing less birds. That's just a fact. Why is that? Is it a migration thing? Is it a less of a population thing? Probably a little bit of both.
So are states up north seeing lesser birds as well, or are they still seeing the same population or more?
Hmm. I would say not as drastic. When I'm talking about southern states, I'm speaking specifically about the state of Louisiana. I mean, it's no secret that they're seeing fewer birds now than they did in the 70s and 60s and 80s.
Yeah.
Our duck population in general has changed a lot since then. So while populations state by state have varied and fluctuated, probably not to the severity that the state of Louisiana has. I want to preface all this by saying I'm not a biologist, I'm not a scientist for some of these leading organizations, so definitely take somebody else's word for it. But based off of what I see, and we collect a lot of data.
Well, you're our analyst, so it doesn't matter
Okay.
what anybody says.
I'm the scientist you got for the next hour. How about
That's
that? Yeah. But as far as like, do they migrate more or less? I don't know. There's a lot of factors out there. There's some really cool work being done by Ducks Unlimited, trying to look at the genetics of ducks. And there's a lot of preliminary data, and I won't steal their thunder, that suggests even though a mallard is a mallard is a mallard, what we're finding is that mallards in Louisiana are actually they're different than mallards in the Dakotas. And those are different than mallards in the East Coast genetically, which is really, really surprising. You would not have thought that. And there's probably implications on migratory efforts based off that. That's really cool. There's some really interesting telemetry data. So that's just a fancy way of saying there's net collars, like geolocating net collars or GPS locators on these birds that is being done by some folks out of West Tennessee, some folks in Arkansas, that I firmly believe is going to kind of usher us into this new era of understanding. And I also think it's going to end up, as we gain more intelligence on the matter, it's going to bring up more questions. So just because there's more questions, it doesn't mean we're less smart about it. It just means as we get smarter about it, it's going to open up the avenue for like, well, now that I know that, nothing else makes sense.
What's the next? Yeah,
Right.
what's the next thing? That's the stepping stone.
And
I
they're
think it's
finding
easy
some
for
really,
people to-
really. What's that?
Yeah, I think it's easy for people to just kind of take the bait and say, oh, it's because of the flooded cornfields up north and the warm ponds, and it's all these things, and it may be something way deeper than we even understand right now.
Well, I mean, there's something to be said about like an easy scapegoat. Whatever is the most easy scapegoat or the easiest thing to point my finger at, that's what everyone's going to hate. And maybe there's something to that, but like you go look at goose populations in southern Illinois near my hometown in the 60s and 70s. I mean, they were everywhere. I mean, they were literally everywhere. And then at the snap of the finger, literally, if you go look on our website, look at the data, the snap of a finger, they're gone the next year. They never come back, just gone. The population didn't get hit that hard in terms of the nationwide population. And people want to blame warm water reservoirs. Did that short stop some? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not here to opine on that. What I can tell you is that there was a shotgun every 50 yards in that county for about 60 days. That probably didn't help.
Yeah.
And there's some telemetry data out there in the world right now that we might start seeing some information on that. I think, if I'm a betting man, I think might say once guns start going off, ducks and geese figure out real quick where they're not getting shot at, and that's where they go.
Yeah. Yep. I can 100% agree with you there.
But on that note, to finish that thought, when they leave, they might not come back. That's the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they figure out where they can go and not get shot, they're going to remember that. And
Well, I mean, that's what they're, maybe, I don't know, I'm not a duck, but I mean, it's got to be probably their biggest priority is not to get killed, survival. right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
So I mean, if a group of 100 ducks comes in and you kill 5 of them, there's 95 of them that learned. I don't need to go back there. Now, of course,
Yeah,
just like any animal, I'm sure there's some that either forget or don't care or come back again, but there's going to be a lot of them that stay away from that area. And after that
right.
happens year after year after year after year, I mean, it's something has to give, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I'm not here to overstate the intelligence of a duck, but I'm also here to say, like, to the point we're making here, if their priority is to survive, when they start realizing, man, I'm getting thrown some steel at anytime I land anywhere near water in southern Illinois or for you guys east Arkansas, like they might figure out pretty quick, where to go or where not to go.
Well, look, we want to talk some more with you about you've been doing this for a couple years now. Kind of some things that you've seen, maybe some shifts in flyways, or kind of just some different things that you're seeing in your research. But let's take another short break real quick. When we come back, we're going to have more from Joe Kiefner with the Migration Station. Welcome back to The Blind. We appreciate you for tuning in tonight. We are talking ducks and duck migration with Joe Kiefner from the Migration Station. If you are tuning in live, we appreciate you for watching. Make sure you share this on Facebook. And if you are tuning in on our podcast sites, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or I guess really wherever you like to get your podcast, it's all over the place. We appreciate you for listening as well. And make sure you follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Go over, follow us, and hit that little subscribe bell and stuff on your social media platforms and podcast platforms. So, Joe, we appreciate you for being with us tonight. I know we've talked some and hit on some of these subjects already, but let's talk from your research kind of some trends that you have seen, because you said that you kind of started this journey in what year? How many years ago? 2020?
We first started collecting data in 2020, but our data set goes back, in some states, it goes back to the 70s.
So you look at the data way more than we do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you see some trends in, and of course it's a hot topic and you may not have the exact answer, and we won't hold you to it to having the answer, but I mean, are you seeing trends of flyways shifting? I mean, in what you see and the data that you have?
It's interesting that you asked that. There's probably a lot of credence to be given to people's personal stories there over the data, because we've never claimed to have all the data that exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We claim to be representative. So if you look at our map and there's a red mark, there's a red heat spot over St. Charles, Missouri right now, it's because we're pretty confident to say if you go to St. Charles, Missouri right now, there's relatively speaking going to be a lot of ducks there. But are there going to be ducks in areas that we're not covering? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I will say that what's really, really interesting is that at least from the data perspective, east, west, central versus Mississippi flyways, we don't necessarily see a decrease in one flyway shifting to another flyway. Mm-hmm. We're just not seeing it, not with respect to ducks anyways. I want to be careful to say again, like we don't claim to have all the data or be the source of truth, but we just don't see it. What we do see is that on years where it gets really, really cold up north and you have about what we had a couple weeks ago, I'd be curious to see if you guys are seeing ducks in Arkansas now. That cold front, full moon, north wind, everything that we had a couple weeks ago or about a week ago, mm-hmm. It definitely moved birds into Oklahoma, and they're a lot earlier than they normally are. So when you have years that are relatively warm back to back to back, people start forming some pretty stout opinions on the good old days versus the nows. In reality, the conditions are just different. You know what I'm saying?
Just from your research and from doing this for a couple years like you have, I mean, what do you, if we could say, what is the number one factor? And I know that we're getting way off down a rabbit hole, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but what would you say is the biggest factor for having a successful duck hunt? Let's just use Arkansas as an example.
When you say,
Would it be weather? Would it be, I mean, uh, duck population? I mean, if you had to say this is the biggest factor for Arkansas to have a good duck season, I mean, would you say that weather is the biggest component?
yeah, so to answer the question, I might be getting a little nitpicky here, but I think the first and foremost, there is the strongest correlation between a successful season from what we've seen. Again, this is just our
We want your research. Yeah,
it's the May pond count. It's not even the breeding population. It's successful recruitment of young birds.
yeah,
The more juvenile birds that are there out there in the world, not to be a little morbid, but they're less educated. They're a little bit more
Yeah.
gullible. They've never seen Arkansas before. That is one of the strongest correlations. So if you have a wet spring in the Dakotas and southern Canada, you've got a lot of prime breeding habitat. That's a golden ticket for pretty much everybody in the central in Mississippi flyways. Same could be said from California. Same could be said for the California and the Pacific flyway. Same could be said for the Atlantic flyway. If your
How-
breeding grounds are wet, then you got a good season ahead of you.
how are those numbers looking this year?
Not great. They weren't. It was interesting. It was really interesting, actually, though.
Well, we
The
appreciate
ma-
everybody for tuning in.
Nah.
Duck season's over.
No.
Before it starts.
Interesting. It was really interesting. So that wasn't looking great. It wasn't looking bad. But what was really cool is that whereas in years past, I think the last year we had a really great, really great spring was like 2014, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you go back and look at duck counts, that's when they were the highest. That's when hunter harvest was the highest. This year was the first year in a while where, like, in years past, it's always either been really dry or really wet across the entire prairie. This year, it was either really dry in certain areas or really wet in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had some entities come out and say, like the Canada, okay, it's really dry. We're not really seeing a whole lot of marshes. We're pretty concerned. But then you had states like North Dakota come out and say, this is the best year we've seen for duck brood production. And that was really encouraging. And so we've really been monitoring the duck counts early on this season. And we're not even half the country hasn't even started duck season yet. But what we're seeing is really, really promising so far. And that's probably an indication of, like, the central states might get a lot of their birds from the Dakotas, which is no secret. And the Dakotas had a really good year. So whereas the whole continent maybe didn't have a great year,
Mm-hmm.
that one specific area having a good year, that could really, be a boost for us.
Yeah.
How does that compare to last year? Just comparing last year to this year, is it similar? Was it what was the results of that last year?
I'd have to go back and look, so don't quote me on this, but if I'm pulling it from my memory, the May pond count was a little bit, or maybe the breeding population was a little bit down. The May pond count was a little bit up, or maybe vice versa.
Okay.
But by and large, relatively the same.
Yeah.
The key difference, though, to go back to the prior point, the key difference is certain states, California is an example, North Dakota is an example, had really, really good production this year that they didn't have last year. So
I got a
I don't know if that
question for
answers
you.
your question.
Yeah,
How's that?
everything you're saying is answering my questions because I want all of it.
Yeah. So I mean,
You got way more information than we do.
if people were to ask me, hey, should I have low expectations, high expectations for this summer? I'm sorry, for this winter and this season, I would think compared to last year, I don't think, unless the weather doesn't cooperate, which we know there's a big part of that. I'd say I'm not any more concerned than I was last year, or less concerned. I think the potential for the folks in the central Mississippi flyway is maybe a little bit better than last year, but it's probably not going to be the best season you've ever had.
If you can answer that golden question, you're going to be a rich man.
Well, and
If people can ask you that question and you can give an answer, you're going to be fine, my man.
Hey,
You're going
I'm
to make
just trying
lots
to
of
be
money.
better than 50%, because they tell you in school, 50% you're failing. But if I'm a Major League Baseball player batting 500, I'm the best there ever was.
Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame. So, but yeah, I mean, you're already better than the meteorologists. I mean, I think they just flip a coin.
They can be wrong most of the time and still keep their jobs.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I'd like to think I'd like to think what we're saying is really, novel and no one's ever said before. But I think where truly Migration Station gets a lot of credit and a lot of really positive community engagement. I mean, the people who follow us, they really like us, and I love hearing that. But we just take a lot of information and we condense it into really easy to understand packages. That's it.
how many people do you have before? I know Garrett's got some questions for you. How many people do you have that help you with this thing?
Uh, yeah, it's
He's
just
right there.
you're looking at employee number one and the last hire.
Well, I didn't know if you had a team of people that help you
No,
compile this information, or you're just so smart you made your computer your team, and you
yeah,
wrote it to where it gathers it for you.
the computer, or I should say the computer entity. It's not not my physical computer,
Yeah,
but
yeah, 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 yeah.
computational power is the team. That's why it took me 2 years to come out with it, is because for those 2 years I was just sitting there just hacking away at a keyboard.
We haven't
Yeah.
harnessed that power yet.
You
But
guys have harnessed plenty of other powers. Like you guys probably have like really cool hobbies or fun things you do. People are like, hey Joe, what did you do this week? And I was like, I literally sat on my computer for a long time. What do you want me
that's
to
funny.
What do you want me to tell you? I didn't do anything. fun.
We've
You're not
talked a
gonna
lot
do.
about your data, but Brian and I, we've been collecting data for
God. Nobody wants it.
for 12 years. And I guess just a pattern that we've noticed is I look back through pictures. That's my data, is looking back through my pictures and seeing what happened during this week of season 2 years ago. As I look back through my pictures, there's about a 2-week period where we live, and that's usually when it gets really good. And that's from about December 12th, 13th, 14th till after Christmas. Usually is when we see the bulk of our mallards show up. At some point in that 2-week window is usually when it turns on. And so, we talk a lot about all these factors and things that play into it, but how much of it do you think is just time? It's
I
time for them
think
to move.
it depends on the species. It really depends on the species.
So
Uh,
speaking on that, kind of talk with us about some of the species there. I mean, you mentioned teal and
yeah,
pintail like to move a little earlier.
yeah, and
What
again,
other ducks kind of do that?
yeah. So I'm the scientist you got for the next hour. I'm not a scientist, but
That's
I'll
our.
wear the scientist hat
Hey,
for.
it's your show. Anything you say on here is
That's you
gospel.
guys' show.
No, it's
We'll just
all
see.
about you tonight.
We'll just see if I get asked back.
We're
That'll
gonna fact
really
check
be
after
the.
this is over.
So like teal and pintail, I would say their biggest thing is going to be their internal clock. They're going to
Yeah.
move. They're going to move when days start getting shorter and that first little bit of cold kicks in. Those two things combined, boom, they're moving. Um, you move on to some of the bigger ducks. Let's move to mallards, for example. Mallards and Canada geese are probably even further away than mallards, but mallards, they're going to hang on for longer. So while their internal clock might start ticking, and some populations of that species will start moving, their biggest push is going to be when that first real cold snap hits. They have a good north wind, and it's probably going to be sometime after this new moon period where the photo period starts really getting shorter. So like I would say anytime after mid-November, if you're in Arkansas, you're probably going to start seeing a lot of mallards show up. But it depends on your habitat type too.
Yeah.
We've talked to some folks who they say their peak mallard numbers occur within the next 2 weeks, like the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends, because a lot of times you might not be seeing mallards where you're hunting or where you're scouting, but they're just utilizing a different habitat.
So are there? I mean, I know you said a lot of it is internal clock and stuff like that. So do the pintails and the teal move earlier because of their size and stuff? They can't handle the colder weather as the other bigger, larger ducks can. Is that why the geese stay so long? And
It could be, yeah. I mean, it could be. I think there's no secret if you were to harvest a mallard or a Canada goose and you look at the relative fat layers that they have versus
right.
a teal or a pintail, there's probably some of that. And that probably is what starts their internal clock is what you're saying is they just can't stand the cooler weather as much. But, I mean, I'm not kidding. We have folks that follow us down in Guatemala, and mid-September they're texting us, hey, Tealer showed up. I'm like, dude, it's 100 degrees in Oklahoma. What are they going? Like, where are they leaving?
they're running from that.
Yeah, I'm outside working and I'm sweating my face off, and you're telling me you got more teal than you know what to do with down in 1,000 miles south of me. So sometimes like hey, the first sign of fall, they're like, I'm out. I'm gone.
Well,
You have geese then too. Geese, they're not going to move hardly at all. Their clock might start ticking, and they might move a little bit south. They're not going to move further south than they need to because again, they're not going to do more than they have to survive. And if all they have to do is to get down to southern Minnesota or Iowa, northern Illinois, that's where they're going to stop. They're not
Yeah.
going
Do
to
they
go
do the
south.
geese do it the same way as the ducks? Different species still migrate at different times, lessers
Yeah,
versus specks versus.
yeah. Based on the data, yeah. Like speckled bellies, they're already in Arkansas. I mean, you guys tell me if they're there, but well, everything we're hearing, they're there.
yeah.
Uh,
There's a lot over in eastern Arkansas. We're kind of in the southwest corner.
okay.
We're over right on the Arkansas Texas line,
Yeah.
and
Red
so
Red
you know
River.
Okay. Yeah.
we don't get a lot of geese over here now.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, we did, and of course that
Okay.
can
So I'm glad
contribute to a lot of different things.
I'm glad you said that then, because now I feel more confident in like what you all were saying versus what I was seeing for my information. Mid-November being a lot of ducks show up. That's Arkansas Delta. If
Mhm.
you're Red River, you're more like me, like
Yeah,
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Yeah,
Our season gets better the longer it goes. Like I
yeah,
swear,
Yeah.
we are going to continue having more and more and more and more and more birds pile up until the season's over.
yeah,
Maybe mallards should be the clarifier there. More mallards will pile up, and then it'll just get better and better.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, of course, I don't know why we don't get geese over in this area anymore. We used to get quite a few geese. I think it has a lot to do with, food sources.
Yeah.
There for, about a decade, the farming industry around our area was just not very good. Now it's picked back up again, and so hopefully maybe we'll draw
And it just
some
changed
of that
maybe
back
more
in.
than it not being good. It just changed. Maybe they started growing more cotton or
Yeah.
different food sources than the rice that they used to plant. And now,
Yeah.
like he said, it's starting to come back a little bit. Hopefully that improves things.
Yeah. So I see we have two comments here. DeAndre Reed asked about wood ducks. Wood ducks are super interesting. They actually,
Never
if
leave.
what do you say?
They never leave.
So it depends on where you're at. It really depends on where you're at. If you're north of a certain line, I can't tell you where that line is, but if you're north of a certain line, they will move. They will move just like other birds will. I don't know what causes them to move more than some of certain other factors, but they will move. It's like my brother, I was with him when he shot a banded drake wood duck, and we were in southern Illinois. That thing was banded in northern Iowa. That thing had moved. And if you look at the data, wood ducks will appear on certain areas and then they'll leave certain areas. But when you get below a certain latitudinal line, those birds don't move but east or west, and they don't move a whole lot.
Mhm.
So wood ducks are really, really interesting. They are semi-migrators, maybe. I don't know what to call them, but depends on where you're at in the country on whether or not they're moving around much.
Yeah.
And they definitely do not migrate nearly as much as other bird species.
Well, we definitely keep some down around this area all year long.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but and then DeAndre also asked about canvasbacks. Tell us a
Man,
little bit about that because we
so-
don't see many here in Arkansas.
I wish I had a good answer for you there, DeAndre, but canvasbacks are such a small population of bird. I don't even think there's, man, I ought to know this. I'm sorry I don't, but I don't even think there's 700,000 of them out there in the breeding population, which comparatively speaking, that's a 10% of how many mallards are out there.
Yeah.
It's not good. And so based on that, we just don't have a ton of data on canvasbacks. The ones that we do see, they tend to move around the same time as mallards, but they're all divers and they all hang out on the rivers.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't tell you what moves them. And yeah, sorry, I don't have a better answer for you there. Just don't have a lot of canvasback info for you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
For sure. Well, look, let's take our last break of the night, and then when we come back, I know we've talked your ears off about all of this data. Let's just talk a little bit of duck hunting, about your background in hunting and goose hunting, and let's talk a little bit of hunting. And so we'll take our last break of the night. When we come back, we'll finally just talk a little hunting with Joe Kiefner from the Migration Station. Well, welcome back. It is our final segment of the night, and we have talked about pretty much everything. We've got a lot of information out there. I mean, it's very interesting stuff. We got Joe Kiefner here with us from the Migration Station, and man, we appreciate you taking time to be with
Yeah,
us tonight.
absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Lots of great information, and even more information that you have out on your website and social media that you guys are on, and we'll get to that a little bit more before we end tonight. But let's just talk a little bit of duck hunting. Tell us a little bit about a little background on you. Kind of, have you hunted your whole life, or when did you start hunting, and kind of,
Yeah. So
what
I
kind of hunting you do?
Yeah, so I grew up. I was very fortunate. So growing up in southeast Missouri, my family has a farm, about 1,000 acres, where we primarily deer and turkey hunted. Definitely not the kind of landscape for duck hunting. And so I grew up around that and bass fishing and bluegill fishing and just love it. I couldn't get enough of it. Um, we in Missouri still have, but at the time had a reservation system for duck for certain conservation areas. So if you're a resident, you can apply for a reservation, and it's a lottery system. Not a whole lot of people get drawn, but I was fortunate enough to get drawn on. It was like November 20 something. It was a dismal day. It was rainy. It was miserable. Of course, my dad didn't want to buy me a nice new pair of waders if it was my first time, and he thought I might hate it. So I'm wearing these size 10 waders, and I'm probably, I probably don't even weigh 100 pounds. So I don't fit these things at all. It's rainy. It's just warm enough to where the water is not freezing, but it's cold. And it was miserable. I mean, I fell in, of course, when you're wearing waders that don't fit. I fell in like more than I took forward steps. So I'm drenched, cold, miserable, you name it. And we had the first flock of teal fly by, and we, laid into them and had a couple of mountains come by, and we got into them too. And I think on the day, four of us got like 9 or 10. It was a good little hunt, but nothing to write home about. And I was just hooked. Just could not get any more of it at that point. Or like seeing them react to the calls, come to the decoys, shooting birds on the wing, hooked from the most miserable hunt. And from then on, I pretty much. It's not that I swore off deer or turkey hunting, but if I've always said, and I've told this to my wife, if I get X amount of days where I can be away from the house and not feel like I'm a terrible person, I'm going to use every single one of them in November, December, and January. That's just going to kind of how it is. So grew up deer and turkey hunting, transitioned to duck hunting, and haven't looked back.
So you're still hunting in Missouri now. You're not hunting a lot in Oklahoma where you live. Is that right?
I hunt a little bit in Oklahoma. If people are, I've got some friends who have some spots that I go to, and I actually just started scouting out of Oklahoma a little bit last year and found some areas that, hopefully I can get into. But I'm always going. My wife and I are both from Southeast Missouri, so over Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, we're always back in Missouri, and so it just kind of works out that if I'm spending 20 days out of the season in Missouri, that's where I do primarily a lot of my hunting. But we have some sponsors who are fantastic companies and businesses, but even better people, and they've extended invites to me, and I've gotten out with them in West Tennessee and hoping to make it to Arkansas this year. So, as Migration Station kind of grows, I'm hoping to kind of grow my network of opportunities. Yeah.
So if
Well,
Joe wants to pick what kind of hunting he wants to do, is he going to a rice field? Is he going to the timber, dry field? What are you doing?
Man, I will tell you, I went on my first dry field Canada goose hunt last year, and if you haven't done it, you're missing out. It's a blast. That's not my answer, but I will throw a shot. Like,
Now,
someone who's
have you ever hunted? And I'm not saying this is better. I'm just have you ever hunted some really good, big, tall green timber in Arkansas?
I've hunted green timber in Missouri, which there's a certain spot in southeast Missouri that is very similar to. I think it's one of the last green timber units in Missouri, actually. So it's practically the same, just in Missouri, not nearly as big, but it's hard to beat. It's hard to beat. I've done it. I mean, we wait in there for an hour. There's no boats allowed, so we wait in there for an hour. We hunt for 10 minutes. We're done. We wait back out for an hour. I mean, it was great. But if y'all had to pick one thing, man, it's really hard to beat a smartweed marsh. Really hard to
Yeah.
beat it because you get every single species coming by there. And of course, everybody likes a pile of green, but it's really cool. Like I'll tell you right now, shovelers in Gadwell, they'll do it right.
Yes,
Oh
yes,
yeah.
yes,
Oh
they
yeah.
will.
They
I
will
mean,
do it right.
Garrett and I hunt,
Take my six
a
gadwall,
little.
or I'm gonna gadwall, and I'll take them and leave. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'll go in there and shoot some gadwall and head out.
We enjoy the public and the private hunting, and we've got some public places that we go and can kill a mixed bag. And of course,
Yeah,
mallard is king, and we love mallards, and that's what we go to kill. If we have a day where we can, if we could ever choose, of course, every time we come home, we'd have a limit of mallards. But man, we enjoy killing teal and gadwall. We'll shoot the spoonies. I mean,
yeah.
we very rarely get any widgeon.
Mhm.
A few pintails here and there, depending on where you're hunting. You hunt some rice fields over here, you'll see a lot of pintail and widgeon. You
Yeah.
hunt more of your lakes, marshy areas, backwater off of rivers and stuff like that. You just don't see many of the
Mhm.
pintail and stuff like that. But we definitely we like to hunt ducks. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
what they are. Well, let me
Yeah.
back up. It does matter what they are. We're not shooting blackjacks or coots, and
Or
but
gansers.
we have been known to shoot whistlers. And,
Okay.
those.
You ever shot a black-bellied whistler?
No, I haven't. I actually just heard about this for the first time like a month
Well-
ago. I was listening to Jim Ronquist's live on Instagram. He was talking about. I'm like, I've never.
They're easy to get into the decoys, but they're hard to kill. You shoot them and they won't die, but they'll fly back out and they'll come right back in and get back in the decoys. You can shoot them a second time, and they
They've got
still
big
might
old-
get up and leave.
They've got big old long legs on them, look like a chicken.
Yeah.
And they're the ugliest thing you've ever seen. I mean, it looks like a chicken. But
It's funny you bring this up. So my wife and I, we went for a drive the other day, and we drove around a lake here near Oklahoma City called Overholser, and we found a little marshy area where there was some mallards feeding, a couple pintail feeding, and it was just really cool to be out there. And we saw quite a few coots too, and it was just so funny to see her initial, first reaction. She'd never heard me talking about coots, so she's not have this biased opinion about them. She's like,
yeah,
man, those things are a little funny.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
they do.
that's an
They do.
honest, that's a true honest opinion of him right there.
Yeah,
That
and
that is
I didn't give
exactly-
her any bias. She never heard me talk about them. She's like, her own conclusion. She's like, hey, those things are a little
Kind of
goofy.
weird.
They act just as goofy as they look, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
But well, man, we would love to get you over here to Arkansas. I mean, of course, we can't promise anything, but we'd love to get you over here for a hunt.
Yeah, I'm all about
and,
it. I'd love to.
and talk in person about the migration station, and
Yeah.
we'd love to. And so, for everybody that may not know exactly where all you are, where can they find your data and all of the information that you put out? Where all do you have that information?
So we're on TikTok and Instagram. I would say, personally, our best information that we put out into the world, it comes on Instagram.
Yeah.
We post really rich visualizations, really cool images to kind of highlight where ducks are, or maybe where some counts are in specific areas. So if you haven't heard of us or you haven't checked that out, first and foremost, go to our Instagram. That's where a lot of the magic happens. We're on TikTok. We post a lot of our videos there too. But we also have a migration map on our website. It's kind of our flagship application. www.migrationstationusa.com. That migration map is updated daily. That migration map is interactive. So if you see a little, heat spot over the Red River, and you want to say, hey, I want to see where this data is coming from and what that data says, or if it's a user-generated report, I want to see the picture that whoever submitted that. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Go click on it. You can see that data. You can interact with it. It's updated daily, so it's fresh and it's there, and you can do whatever you want with it.
That's awesome. I like the interaction part of it, where you're not just getting a big long essay somewhere saying, well, this is what we saw, blah, 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 blah. You can actually click on it, interact with it, and like you said, maneuver around and see different things instead of just reading an article on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's what we're trying to do, is just make it easy and simple and quick. And like I said, if you want to go see that data point, maybe you agree with it, maybe you disagree with it, maybe you want to see more about it, you click on it, you take 5 seconds, you digest it, and you say, okay, cool, and then you move on.
Well, in a week and a half, we are going to get with you and let you know what Southwest Arkansas looks like.
Okay.
I'm
I look forward to
afraid,
it.
as of the data that I have compiled so
Yeah.
far, just from seeing what I have seen the last couple weeks, I don't think it's going to be real great. But a lot can change in a week and a half.
Our season opens in Oklahoma this coming weekend, I believe. And man, I got to tell you, there are probably some spots in Oklahoma that are going to do fantastic. I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, yeah,
Not yet, but I'm here to tell you, come January, I mean, every pothole is just going to be covered.
yeah.
Well, regardless of what we see or what we think is going to happen, we're all going to be fired up come opening morning.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, for
at,
sure.
at least for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Till
So-
until 8:30 rolls around, like, well, about
Yeah,
time for that 9 o'clock mallard to come floating in.
that's right. That's right. Well, look, before we part here with you, if you could give one bit of information or about what you're doing, for somebody that watches this show and you want them to know what you are, what your brand is,
hmm
what would you tell them? I mean, what do you want people to know about Migration Station?
We're just here to help people understand information about ducks, duck hunting, and duck migrations, and goose as well, as best as we can. So if you've got questions, email us. My personal email is out there for anybody to have or anybody to use. Message us on Instagram. We're active with our messages. We just want to help people make the best decisions they possibly can with their time when they go hunting, and help people better understand the resource that we enjoy the sport of. That's it.
Well, man, we appreciate you taking the time to not only come on our show tonight and give us a rundown on everything you're doing. We think it's awesome, but we appreciate you for taking the time to develop this, to give hunters like us that don't know anything about it, the data side, something to look at, because, I mean, it is a lot of work, but it's very interesting. I think it's a tool that every hunter, no matter of what level they are, whether they just started or they've been doing it for 30 years, it's useful information. So
Yeah,
I just want to tell you, from some avid hunters here in Southwest Arkansas, we appreciate what you're doing.
For sure.
We enjoy your content, and if there's ever any way that we can help you out in any way, we would love to. And again, love to get you down here for a hunt.
As long
Yeah,
as it's not
absolutely.
software.
As long as
Disclaimer.
I said no, I said anything we could help with. He's not going to ask. Yeah, I can barely work an
I'll do this again
iPhone.
sometime. This was fun. I like talking with you guys. It's fun.
Yeah, hey, if
Do it
you
again.
if you're up for it, we'd love to have you on later on in duck season and just kind of catch up with you and just see what you're seeing and talk about the data that you've compiled over the last, maybe a month from now, and just kind of see where we are, maybe at the end of December or something, maybe midway through Arkansas's duck season, and let's just
hopefully we're talking about how many ducks you guys are covered up with, and hopefully you guys don't have me on here to be like, hey man, like, what's up?
Well, either way, we'd love to have you back on here, kind of midway point, and kind of see what you're seeing, and kind of just throw some things around and catch up and see what everything looks like across the nation.
Yeah, that sounds great. I look forward to it.
So again, go over to www.migrationstationusa.com. Also in the comments, you can see where their Instagram, TikTok. Make sure you go over and like them and follow them for they got new stuff coming out every day. We enjoy looking at it. So if you're not following them yet, make sure you go and look at it as well. And so, Joe, man, we appreciate you very much. And make sure you go over and follow The Blind on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And also go and check out tomorrow, the Joe, you as well, and tell your friends about it. Our podcast version of the show is just a little bit different. The content's the same, but instead of course, the visual commercials, we have audio commercials and a little different intro and stuff like that. The guy Cam, you can't see him. Cam is our producer. He's behind the scenes, and he does all of this for us. We just get on here and talk, and he'll put the podcast version together right after we end the live Facebook version here in just a minute. It'll be out here in a couple hours. So tomorrow on your drive to work or your commute to the deer camp this weekend here in Arkansas, check out the podcast version. We're really trying to grow that side of things. So anybody that can give us some love on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we really, really appreciate it. And it's a really good listen. Like I said, it's a little bit different than the Facebook, YouTube one, and it's very well put together. So appreciate our man Cam for doing that. But Joe, have a great night, man. We appreciate
Appreciate
you.
you, Joe.
We'll be in contact, and everybody make
We'll
sure to
keep in
go check
touch.
out the migration station. And so
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
All right.
that's going to do it for episode 12 here on season 2. We'll be back with you next week with another great guest right here on The Blind. Until then, we'll see you later.